Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Host Chris Santomassimo from OGC Solutions, and we power the Think Factory podcast. And I'm excited to do a part two. In fact, this is the first, I guess you'd say, follow-up episode or sequel. And I'm here with my friends Joe Truncale from Alexander Joseph and Associates and Mike Philie from the Philie Group. So welcome to the podcast again.
Good morning. Thanks, Chris. Morning, Joe.
You guys must be doing something right because again, you got so much to talk about. We got to create a series just around you two guys, and we had such a good time the first time. I'm sure this one will be good too. So we won't take up any time reintroducing Joe and Mike. In fact, you can go back to part one of the podcast and hear about their backgrounds and the good work that they're doing in the printing business and with printing customers. But what we wanted to talk about today was really some stories from the trenches, so to speak, the things that Joe and Mike are doing every single day with their customers. And that is, this idea of growth in the clients that they serve. The idea is, well, what they want to do, of course, is work with Joe and Mike to figure out ways to grow their business, mature their business, etc. But there's a lot of challenges around that, and the challenge is to find a plan or a strategy around how to make a company grow and be profitable. Why is it so hard for some companies, and some companies seem to be able to do it a lot more easily? So with that setup, guys, take it away and share some ideas.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so let me jump in. So I think, we say it's easier for some than others, but I think it's, first of all, let me just be clear. It's hard. It's hard to be in the printing business today. It's very transitional. There's a lot of moving parts. The rate and pace of change has just been phenomenal, right? And not only in the different things that printers can produce and how they produce it, but client expectations as well. Everybody's kind of reeling or have rebounded from our episodes with COVID and what that did to the business. But I look at it as that what COVID didn't really introduce many new things other than really accelerate patterns and tendencies that may have already existed. So the rate and pace of change, as I mentioned before, is accelerated, and printers typically have done very well with change. But when you look back at it, a lot of the change occurred with equipment, technology, inside their shop. And I think one of the major changes over the last 3, 4, 5 years that I've seen is the changes outside of their shop. In other words, with their customers, how they buy, the kinds of people that are in those positions that are responsible for buying. That's changed dramatically. And the reasons for why they buy and how they use print have also increased exponentially, in that there's products today that 5 years ago it didn't really exist, or the mechanism for how consumers or businesses could get them didn't really exist. So I think those printers that have been close to their customers and followed what their trends are and understand how they use print to help drive their business, I think have been able to latch onto some of those things and adapt their change transition, if you will, to something that's meaningful and relevant to that customer base. It's a long way of saying that I think that you really got to stay close to your customers, whatever markets those you really want to be in, and really understand and help them understand the ways that they can use print more effectively, more efficiently to help drive their business and generate revenue for their operations. Joe, what are you seeing in all of this?
Well, I agree with you, Mike, and I keep hearing over and over again, it's hard to make money in this business. You can do it, but it's hard. And it's like anything else, if you look at professional athletes, they perform at a high level and you say, wow, the really good ones make it look easy. It's not easy. Even if you have all the ability and all the talent, you still got to work day in and day out to get it to a high level where you can really compete at a high level. And it's true in business too, particularly our business. Sometimes I think about this in relation to, I'm a big fan of Michael Porter. Went to high school about 5 miles from here, Monmouth Regional High School. He's a New Jersey guy, by the way. He's a bright guy. And Princeton guy, Harvard guy. But I think about the five forces, right? And if you overlay that on the printing industry now, and you say customers, what's changing about customers? Well, nothing and everything, right? A lot more choices, the way they buy, who represents the customer in the buying relationship, and so forth. And then these third parties, whether it's an H Global, Interworkings, Williams Lee, we've seen all of this kind of transition and change the way some print buying gets done. The supplier landscape has changed too. The manufacturers very, very supportive in terms of providing learning experiences and ways in which printers can use the equipment they're selling them to enhance their business. But at the same time too, the supplier landscape has changed dramatically. We did a study with Andy Paparosi some years ago at NAPL and asked our printing company members what they want from their suppliers and manufacturers. This is true for equipment, technology, and consumables. And the overriding theme through all of that was, the sales rep used to come around more often than they do now. And we miss that. It wasn't an intrusion in our day. It wasn't an interruption. We'd maybe have lunch or we'd meet for a while. We'd learn from them what's going on, what's coming around the bend, what are you hearing? And they were a great source of information. That doesn't happen the way it used to. So all of these different things, and of course, to say nothing of competition, printers aren't just competing with each other anymore. They're competing with emergent technologies and other choices that provides. So the level of complexity has gone up and up and up. But through that all, somehow there are a certain number of companies that are still very, very successful. And I'll just put a bow on this, saying it this way: to my way of thinking, each of them have maintained what I call a high level of intellectual curiosity. They don't walk around thinking they have all the answers, and they're not insular and inward looking and thinking, well, the answers are all going to be found inside these four walls. They've got a great team, have a lot of confidence in them, but the idea of being a learning organization and having a highly development, what I call, PLS, personal learning system, is part of that.
So I think the name of the game, or one of the names of the game, would be, being able to be in front of some of the trends that your customers are looking for and some of the new products and services. How does a company, whether it's in print or outside print, sort of stay ahead of the game and predict what the next thing, so to speak, is going to be, as opposed to being reactionary to those things? Or maybe the alternative route is it a matter of deciding what you're good at and having a plan to capitalize on what you're good at, or are you looking a little bit outside yourself to make those choices?
I think with the capital investments involved in equipment and technology and people and all of that, right? It's very difficult to just kind of bounce around to different trends and different things like that. So my feeling has always been, how do we leverage what we currently have and morph that or repeat that in such a way that now appeals to maybe a different audience or a different market? A lot of times we may be doing something for a particular vertical market, which we think it's only for them. But if we, with a few little tweaks, it may apply to several other different markets as well. And really, we can take the same thing we're doing and repeat it often again. The other part that I see a lot is, and this I'll circle back to this, Joe. I mean, Chris, as far as staying ahead of things, but taking what we currently do and not stopping at the one or two customers that we do it with. In other words, we're really good at higher education. I'll pick that as a topic. Most printers are. They do a really good job with that. When I go into an organization, I'll say, okay, you do a lot of good stuff with schools. Let's take a look at all the schools you're working with in your marketplace, and you come to find out that maybe they do a lot of work, but they're only working with maybe three or four out of maybe the 15 schools that are in their region. Okay, so who's calling on the other ones? Well, we don't We're not, right? So how can we take the same things we've been doing with these two or three and expand it beyond that normal reach, and on purpose and intentionally go out and find and start calling on these other folks as well? The other part, as far as how do we stay current and how do we stay, maybe ahead of the game? To me, the biggest thing is to start looking outside of your four walls. Too often I see printing companies totally consumed by what they know within their organization. Whether it's trade shows, whether it's webinars, whether it's podcasts, such as the one we're doing right now. Of course, I have to plug that one. Reading, learning what other industries are doing, what other trends are doing, and now how can we take that and apply that to our business, and maybe more importantly, bring those ideas to our customers that perhaps those things that they had not thought about in the past, and it could be additive to what it is that they're doing. Sometimes we get a little closed in within the four walls of our operation. And I think maybe that first step is to break out of that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
about it's really
go ahead.
about looking outside for the ideas that are going to charge up the next maybe phase of your business, in a sense, right?
That's a big part, and bringing continually. I guess just think about it this way: if we're continually charging ourselves, holding ourselves responsible and accountable to continue to bring new ideas to our customers, where are those ideas going to come from, right? Right. So if we have to look, we have to look maybe at some different places. I keep using this as a reference. I had a gentleman that I worked with a number of years ago. Um, he had this line where he never walked into a customer's. He was a sales guy. Never walked into a customer's office without an idea that he had worked on for them. And his line was, "I have a lot of ideas. Every once in a while, I have a good one." But guess what? His customers looked forward to him coming to see them, because he knew that every time he had prepared for it, he had worked for it, and he wasn't showing up at the door with his hands out, basically saying, what do you have for me? How can I help you?" He was bringing insight into their business. In fact, he oftentimes knew more about their go-to-market strategy and how they use print to drive business than they did as well, or at least equal to. And I think that's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mike. I'm reminded some years ago, we bought a research company out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, we being NAPL, called EKG Research. And this was a customer survey that printing companies use to survey their customers. It was developed by a guy who owned a really, really substantial ad agency for years. And he understood research. Great, great guy, smart guy. Anyway, we liked it so much we bought the company, as the saying goes. But some of there were 22 questions on that survey. 16 were standard, so you could benchmark. But I was surprised when I read some of the questions, and a lot of them focused on, Mike, what you just said. My rep brings me ideas. He understands my business. He's aligned with what we're trying to accomplish. Again, this idea of bringing suggestions and ideas on ways that would improve the circumstance of what we're doing. Now, you're not in a position to do that unless you understand what that business is all about and what they're trying to accomplish in the first place. Now, you have to work from a foundation of building trust in order to have the right to ask those kinds of questions. But once you get there, now you're aligned with what they're trying to do, and it changes everything. I mentioned article, reading and so forth, and personal learning system. And you asked earlier, Chris, well, what should you ask your customers about what they want and need? I'm reminded of Henry Ford's quote that he said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So sometimes it's a mix and match kind of thing. There are new technologies, new applications, new products, new ways of doing things that your customers may not be aware of. And that's when you get to that point, when you take that step, now you're a true resource, and they look to you for advice and ideas and information that's really going to help their company grow. One of the articles that I'm a big fan of, and it's not a new article, but it's been around a long time, is called Marketing Myopia, and it's by Theodore Levitt. Now, Levitt was a trained economist, but his whole position was most of people in business, particularly manufacturing, have it backward. Now, this is his words, not mine. They start with, let's create let's manufacture a product and then go out there and see, who would want it. And his theory is you should reverse that. Find out what your core customers really want and need, and do your best to try to produce it. Now, that's easier said than done. We're in the manufacturing business. We've got investments in plant and equipment, and we get that. But taking some elements of what Levitt is saying and being more in tune with your customers and so forth is you never miss with that. And just one closing thought on this part of it, and Mike, this, it's not by accident that the most successful companies that we see in the industry are members of peer groups like the ones Mike runs. They send their people to the Graphic Communications Leadership Institute, slight plug here, that Mike and I started a few years ago. And you look at the roster of companies, just say, yeah, these are companies that are successful and they're growing. And the common thread is that they actively learn, they get out there, not just the owners, but they're sending the next generation of managers and leaders to get this kind of training too, and to build peer relationships in the industry. It makes all the difference ultimately.
Well, what's interesting about what you just said in a short time, Joe, is that there's a bit of duality in a sense. On the one hand, you need to voice a customer to learn about what you should be providing and provide a solution. When you talk about Henry Ford, in a sense, Henry is saying you're going to tell the customers what they need. So maybe there's a combination of success factors there where, if a customer knows kind of what they want, you can tell them what exactly they want and then help deliver it as part of an overall solution, right?
Yeah, and the common thread is knowing what they want in the first place. And it's not that they're, uneducated or they're lazy, none of that. How would they know about these other opportunities unless somebody who does know brings it to them and say, hey, I understand you're trying to get from here to there. There's another way to do this that might accelerate your path forward. Let me share that with you.
Right.
Let me just add one more thing too. I think you have to determine what position or what seat in the table do you want to sit at. For example, do you want to be the person that seat is just responsible for executing whatever it is that they've asked for, and your job is just to execute it? You do a very good job of doing that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Or do you want to be in a different seat where now perhaps you influence what it is that they're going to be doing, only because you understand what they're ultimately trying to achieve as opposed to what they're asking for, right? In other words, people don't wake up in the morning and open the closet and say, oh, we're low on postcards. We got to order some more postcards for a direct mail campaign. They wake up in the morning saying, hey, we have this event, or we have this product we're trying to sell, or we have beds we're trying to fill, or seats we're trying to fill, and we need to have a better campaign because it's what we're doing is not as effective as what our goals have been determined. So it's really what the outcome is. What are they trying to achieve by whatever it is they're asking us to produce? I think that's a big part of it. I'll just add one more thing to what Joe was saying. Too often I see us meaning the printing community, speak like and behave like we're the victims, that we're just the recipients of whatever our customers want. And to me, and I get it, right? We're in a manufacturing thing. We've got to fill capacity. We've got to take orders. We got to do all this stuff. But there's an offensive play too. I mean, you can just play defense all day, or do you want to play offense? And if you want to play offense, you need to really understand what the market is doing, what our customers' markets are doing, and how can we help them be more effective in that and take a more proactive role than basically just waiting for the email to come or the phone to ring. As Joe mentioned, some of the articles he likes to read. One of the books I read recently, 10X from Grant Cardone, and one of my takeaways from it is that he's got a line in there that says, "Things don't happen to me; they happen because of me." And to me, that was pretty strong. That's a strong statement, right? We have a choice every morning, or as individuals and as organizations. Do we want to try to make something happen today, or are we going to wonder what happened today?
Yeah, and I think by going on offense, again, it goes back to that solution provider concept where you're providing more than just a commodity, that the commodity being the printing or the mailing or whatever it is, because lots of folks can execute on that. But at the same time, you have to execute. No matter how good your idea is, you have to be able to execute and provide value on that end as well. Um, Maybe that's a good segue into another topic I wanted to ask you about a little bit, and that is, this concept of just being a busy company where you're stuck in the blocking and tackling and the tactical end of your business all day. It seems to me that the more successful companies are able to, get away from that a little bit. So talk a little bit about, if you can, your experience with, helping companies get out of that tactical mode and into more of a, uh, a mode in which they have a direction toward a goal, perhaps.
Oh, let's switch it up. Why don't you take the first stab at
Sure.
this?
Well, I have a bias here, which I'll readily admit. I'm a big believer in strategy and planning and thinking strategically and then executing tactically, and taking the time to do that. For some owners, it's well, I have a plan, it's in my head, or we know what we're doing, or we really can't afford to take the time to think strategically about the future of the business. And I said, well, okay, but in my experience, you're better off if you do. Really take that time and work on your strategy, and then deploy a plan that fits that strategy by just asking a lot of questions. A couple of things about that. If we look at customer analysis, for example, and take a deep dive on key accounts and prospects and so forth, it generally is not done. We know who the customers are, we know how much money they're spending with us, but do we really know what's going on inside that company? Are we getting our full share of what they buy? Who are their competitors? What's the status of that industry? What's the status of that company? Their leadership? Are they in transition? Are they on the acquisition trail? Are they an acquisition target? And you might say, well, how would we know that? Well, it starts with a robust conversation of really taking a look at the current accounts we have and what's going on with them. There's another activity internally. We spin a lot of wheels. We just do. And if you buy this notion of the 80-20 rule, more to a point, 89% to 90% of your sales come from the top 25% of your accounts, which means that 10% of your sales come from 75%. Now you can test that theory, but it turns out it's pretty accurate. And what we find internally is we're spending a lot of time servicing customers at a high level, all of our customers, some of whom are just transactional accounts. And it's not that they don't deserve our attention. We can't afford to give them the kind of attention we give to key accounts. It just doesn't work that way. There's I studied and really immersed myself in a technique for management accountants, really called activity-based costing. And I don't know if I recommend it, just carte blanche, but conceptually anyway, it kind of makes sense. And it's not something you see in typical accounting systems. How much time does it take us, for example, in the printing industry, to do an estimate, to do a quote? How many people are involved in those things, and what's the cost of that? Now you say, well, those are payroll costs, they're fixed anyway. Yeah, and they'll have to do something, right? But could that time and that effort and that energy, if we put a price tag on that, activity-based costing leads us to that, right? We would say, you know what? It's probably better if we deploy those resources in a different direction. So chasing everything, and we get this swirl of busyness. When we strip that all away and we take a closer look at where we really make our money, we often find that, gee, we're spending a lot of time and resources over here, and it's not easy to do, but it starts with that conversation. How could we redirect those energies towards something that's even more productive for the business and for our clients?
And I love the phrase that you shared earlier when we chatted, Joe. This tyranny of the urgent, kind of referring to the swirl of activity that takes you away from that goal on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, the barometer on that one, Chris, I teach at NYU. I don't have a lot of rules. I tell my students, one is you have to turn your phone off during class. They all but break out in hives. Some of them, how can I go 2 hours without? Well, no, we need you to concentrate.
Right.
And so I say that, Mike and I go to conferences, Mike, you have meetings and I do. And, and we look, you can't be checking your emails and texting during, it's going to take away your attention. You go to senior level management meetings and there they are with them. And I say, look, one of the ground rules is be fully present. Be fully present. Now we have breaks. We're scheduled breaks. I go over there. We'll have a break at 10:45, whatever. That's the time to check your emails, to call the off, to do everything you need to do. But when we're in session, you need to be fully present. And again, it's just we live in a distracted world. Our phones, our smartphones are wonderful tools, but boy, you don't need me to tell you how addictive they can be and how distracting they can be. So eliminating a lot of that noise and just focusing for even short bursts of time, the payback on that is tremendous. There's more and more documented research to indicate that as soon as you break away from what you're working on to look at something, or that it's not just the time you're looking at that, whatever distracted you, it's the time it takes to get you back to where you were, to get that level of focus back again. And it's dramatic. So yeah, eliminating a lot of the noise, trying to dial down some of the distractions, and really focus on what we're trying to accomplish and articulate it in a structured way can make a big difference.
And Mike, I think it even goes a little deeper than that. Joe's got an excellent point about, being present and focused. But I think the distractions, if you will, are just the day-to-day process of running a business, no matter what business you're in, because you could spend the time really focused on trying to grow in an outward way, or focusing on achieving those set goals, but you get distracted by the problem on the production floor and the new order that came in and the planning. I mean, it's all good stuff. I mean, you don't want to turn it away, obviously, but it may not be what you as the leader of the business need to focus on 24/7, as opposed to maybe delegating some of that stuff and focusing on, what is that goal I'm trying to reach.
Yeah, it's a good point, Chris. One of those things happens to me. It's if you think about it, do we have the right people in the right seats? To use an EOS term. When we do have the right people in the right seats, it almost makes it look easy. I mean, maybe that's a stretch. Maybe it's like a duck in a pond, right? It looks nice and calm. It's paddling pretty quickly underneath. But it makes a huge difference when we do have the right people on the team. When we don't have the right people, then everything is a problem. Everything is multiple conversations, emails back and forth. We need to, as a leader goes, you get dragged into every type of situation. Everything is a fire drill. It kind of goes back to, but to Joe's point, without a plan, though, sometimes we just default to being the answer guy. That leader says, I'm here to solve problems for my team every day. That's what I'm going to come here to do. And that can be a strategy. The other strategy is, I come here today and I'm going to be working on where I want to see this company in 6 months, in a year, in 18 months, in 24 months. Now, if the place catches on fire, then yes, I'm going to get involved, right? But for the most part, I've spent the time, money, resources to bring in a competent staff. I trust them. I've articulated the direction we're going. They're capable, and I'm going to let them handle it. As businesses have grown, sometimes the leader, the owner, the founder, in the earlier days, they had to do everything. I get it, right? You were in the middle of every decision. The press broke or a folder broke. You were sometimes the guy fixing it. I totally understand that. But as things evolve, and if you have put the right people in the right place, then you need to remove yourself and let them do the job that you hired them for. It's no different than like a sports team. As Joe was just describing strategy and things like that, I'm reminded of, as we enter, we've started. It's fall here, right? So it's football season. When you think about the football teams, the head coach, he's got a scouting team, right? That has given them some great information on what that opponent looks like. Well, to me, that's market research. We want to go into what will appeal to them. What are some of the obstacles? What are some of the hurdles in front of us? We put together a playbook for that team. We articulate what those plays are going to be for that that weekend. But that's the beginning part. Once the game starts, it kind of goes back to the Mike Tyson's quote of "Everybody's got a plan until I punch him in the face," right? So we have that plan, but we've got to be able to, watch the situation and learn from it. Okay, how's it working? How are we going to react to it? Where do we need to pivot? And if you're not able to do that, you may get left by the wayside. But those that can read, react, pivot the best, I think, will end up winning the games. That's no different than running a business, right? We have a group of people from different backgrounds that are all here to accomplish a common goal. That's what teams are, right? That's what teams are. And the better we're able to articulate where we are going, what the plan is. Here are the plays we're going to run. Here are the plays we won't run. Right. Sometimes it's about the defining things we won't do is almost as important as the other way around. And then just like a coach would do on the sideline when somebody runs off the field, you look at your players every day. You look at them right in the eyes. How are we doing? Right? Are we on track? We good? And then you keep on going.
If I can, because I'm such a fan of sports in general and football in particular, Mike, if I could pick up on that analogy. So you call a play in a huddle, you get to the line of scrimmage, what happens? The quarterback checks the defensive alignment, calls out signals, maybe kills the play that was called. They'll call 2 plays in the huddle. And that's where communication has to be in. And quarterbacks anymore, they don't throw to a person. They throw to a spot where they think the person needs to be. Now, if that person heard it wrong or didn't interpret it the right way, right, the communication breaks down. They cut to the left, the ball goes to the right, and guess what? It's an unhappy outcome. One of the things that I stress, in fact, I was just on a call this morning with a client about this. How do we communicate internally on an ongoing basis? Because so much is going on, Chris, you're right. There are customer demands, things happen, an employee, this happened, that, a lot of different things happening. How are we going to communicate and what tools are we going to use? And I heard just very, very recently, well, some of us use Trello, some of us use Smartsheet, some share files, some basic. No. We're going to pick one. I'll be there in a couple of weeks. We're going to pick one and you're going to learn it. You're going to commit to it. Now, you don't have to use all the bells and whistles on whatever tool you use, but we've got to pick one that we're going to use. We're going to learn it and we're going to apply it, because you cannot use email for this. It's just staggering to me. Internal communications via email. You have to be kidding. I ask them, how many emails? You turn on your phone in the morning or you come into how many emails do you have? It's just, the number's staggering. It's not the best tool to communicate among a team, particularly a senior leadership team, in my opinion. You need something different, something better that's reserved just for that ongoing communication where you can track projects, people, what's going on inside the business and so forth. And there are a variety of tools you can use, but just pick one and go with it and learn it and rely on it for that type of internal communication, which is so critical.
Yeah, and about communicating what the goal is maybe even the first step there. It's making sure that people are on the same page about what it is we're trying to achieve. And hopefully that helps them get out of the weeds as well and not focus so much on the tactical parts of the business every day.
Yeah, well, another reason we're having a plan, I mentioned in what I wrote not too long ago, a company Mike's very familiar with, McKinsey, wrote a report here, what employees say matters most to motivate performance. This is another thing of mine, performance management. I can't tell you how many companies, we quit doing that. We talk to our people all the time. They know what's expected of them. That's a pale substitute for a robust performance management process and system. But one of the things, not surprising, employees say, we'd like to know where the organization's heading. What are our goals? What are our objectives? What is it we're trying to accomplish here? And what's my department's role in that? And more specifically, what's my part in all of that? And what I do day in and day out? And how does that all link together? And again, that's part of having a concrete strategy, a written direction that you share, that all people are aligned behind, and we can communicate effectively at all levels of the organization.
Joe, let me pick up on something that you just said with the communication, because I've been involved in some turnarounds and where maybe the communication level within the organization just wasn't where it could be. And what happens, and particularly when companies are either struggling or there's just a lot of change going on. And if we're not communicating what's going on to the staff, they will come up to their own, they will come up with their own conclusions. They will draw a conclusion, and guess what? It won't be the positive side of things. It'll be the negative side of things. And I always use this example is that, you may have one of your staff members that works in production. They come home at night and their spouse says, "Hey, how's it going at work?" You go, "Well, I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "Well, we're doing there's a lot of change going on, or we're moving things around. There's people coming and going." "Oh, is that good or bad?" "I don't know." "Huh. Well, Johnny's getting ready to go to college. I mean, are we going to be okay?" "Well, I don't know." So those things just build and build and build. And whether you have good news or bad news or somewhere in between, I just believe that it's so important to stay in front of it and just and share what you want them, to feel about all this, because not what you want them to feel about it, but what the reality is, and how, to your point, what their role is, how they can help, right? Because everybody's got to be additive to this. Because if we don't tell them, it just doesn't end well. It just doesn't. It just creates unnecessary drama, the things we have to fix later on.
Yeah, Mike, you're right. Chris, it's a force of nature. Whenever there's a void of information inside an organization, it can't stay that way. It doesn't stay that way. It gets filled, and very quickly, and usually with the wrong information. And it starts with somebody says, "Oh, well, we know why they're doing that, don't you?" "No, why?" "Well, blah, blah," and away we go. And that becomes the de facto rule of law inside the organization. And suddenly everybody's walking around thinking that's what's going on, and it's not. So yeah, there's no, I mean, it's human nature.
Yeah, and you mentioned EOS, Mike. EOS talks about not only setting goals, but making sure they're well communicated through the organization so that the team can achieve what it is they're being asked to do. And I think staying informed about how they fit into the equation is probably one of the most powerful tools we can use in running a business, no doubt.
Yep. Yep.
Guys, this was terrific today. We should do I hate to put it on your calendar, but we should, to crowd up your calendar. But I learned something each time we talk, and I really appreciate your the sharing that you do and the good work that you're doing for your clients. This is terrific.
Thanks, Chris.
Well,
it's a real pleasure.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Joe, but I think for us, for me anyway, it's a passion. It's a passion about this industry. It's been in it for a long, long time. It's all I've ever done. And even with all the changes and all the uncertainties with clients and different things like that, I guess I've never seen it as more opportunistic throughout my 4 decades of being in this business. And for those who are well prepared, for those who want to play offense, we use that word again. Um, it's yours for the taking if in fact you want to put the work in to get it done.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree with Mike. It's a tremendous industry. I've been in it for many, many, many decades now, as Mike has. And, I think of Ulysses. I'm a fan of that poem where, that which we are, we are. We may not be the industry we were some years ago, but it's still a viable force. And I have the ultimate respect for people who begin and run and grow a business because I know how hard it is. I know how many times they take risks, how many times they double down on that risk to grow the company and move it forward. And it just takes so much. And I have a world of respect for business people in general, entrepreneurs in general, but in particular, people in this industry.
Well, you've really brought us full circle in the conversation because we started out, I think, or you started out talking about how you can't be a victim or view yourself as a victim of change. You need to seize it and do something with it. And I think, at least in my experience, that's a minority of businesses or a small share of the market of businesses that think in that respect. So for those that do, to your point, it's a great opportunity. That's a good environment for it. So again, guys, thank you so much. Just to close it out for today, this has been Mike Philie, the principal from the Philie Group, Joe Truncale from Alexander Joseph and Associates, really sharing some poignant tools that folks can use and even apply to their own businesses. So thank you for all the sharing that you did today. And this has been Chris Santamassimo from OGC Solutions, powering the Think Factory podcast. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.